This is musicologist Jane, reading you the program notes for the Stockton Symphony's concerts on January 22nd and 23rd, 2022. First up, Sprout by Chen Yi, who was born in Guangzhou, China, April 4th, 1953. Chinese-American composer Chen Yi writes bold, sometimes pensive, or humorous compositions that seek to distill and combine the essence of Chinese and Western traditional music. Her works have been performed throughout Europe, the United States, and China, and her numerous honors include the prestigious Charles Ives Living Award and grants from the Guggenheim Foundation, National Endowment for the Arts, and the Fromm, Ford, and Rockefeller Foundations. She has been commissioned to compose for myriad orchestras, chamber groups, and soloists, including the Central Philharmonic of China, Cleveland Orchestra, Women's Philharmonic, Los Angeles Philharmonic, Kronos Quartet, Emmanuel Axe, Yo-Yo Ma, and James Galway. Having begun violin and piano studies at the age of 3, Chen Yi managed to continue her music studies during China's Cultural Revolution in the 1960s by practicing on a muted violin. She later served as a concertmaster and resident composer at the Beijing Opera Troupe of Guangzhou, where she started researching Chinese traditional music and Western and Chinese theory. Her studies at the Beijing Central Conservatory culminated in her becoming the first woman in China to receive the master's degree in composition in 1986. She earned her doctorate in 1993 at Columbia University, where she studied with Chu Wencheng and Mario Davidovsky. Chen Yi has served as Lorena Searcy Craven's Millsap, Missouri Distinguished Professor at the Conservatory of the University of Missouri, Kansas City, UMKC, since 1998, and is a frequent guest lecturer and composer advisor for many organizations. Her recent teaching endeavors have included her position as Thousand Talents Distinguished Visiting Professor at the Tianjin Conservatory of Music, 2012 to 15. Her recent compositions range from a solo percussion work, Colors of Naobo, 2015, performed by Evelyn Glennie at the Edinburgh Festival, to Thinking of My Home, also 2015, for treble clef choir, performed by the Frontier Trail Middle School Choir in Kansas. As a cultural ambassador for new music from the East and West and education exchange programs, Chen Yi has been involved in recent years with the programs of the Beijing Modern Music Festival, the Beijing International Composition Workshop, BICW, the Shanghai Spring Festival, the Tianjin May Festival, the China ASEAN Music Week, the Thailand International Composition Festival, and orchestras throughout China and other Asian countries. She believes that music is a universal language, improving understanding between peoples of different cultural backgrounds and helping to bring peace in the world. Sprout for String Orchestra was composed in 1986, first performed on May 31st of that year by the Central Philharmonic Orchestra of China, conducted by Lan Chui. Chen Yi has written of the work, haze and reverie and faint longing is budding from the depth of free and graceful meditation. The pitch material in the piece is drawn from the Jieshi tune of Yulan, the earliest ancient Qian music score discovered so far, written by Qingming, 494 to 590 BC. The thoughtful melodies taken from the opening section are woven together in a double canon as the recapitulation part of the piece, leaving a lasting impression after the quiet ending. In contrast to two outside sections, the middle is more animate and active. The work is scored for strings. Our second piece is the Horn Concerto No. 1 in E-flat major, Opus 11, by Richard Strauss, who was born in Munich, June 11, 1864. He died in Garmisch-Partenkirchen, September 8, 1949. Franz Strauss, leading horn player of the Munich Court Orchestra, was known as one of the finest horn players in Europe. It was natural that the young Richard Strauss would show an affinity for his father's instrument. As a youth of 14, Richard dedicated 2 pieces to his father. The song Ein Alpenhorn höre ich schallen, I hear an Alphorn resounding, for soprano and piano with a fiendishly difficult obligato horn part, an introduction, theme, and variations for horn and piano. A concerto for the instrument seemed a foregone conclusion, but when Strauss completed his first horn concerto in 1883, he dedicated it to Oscar Franz, Dresden horn virtuoso and author of a famous method book. Though proud of his son's achievement, Richard's father never played the concerto in public, considering the recurring high notes too risky. He frequently played it in family circles, however, and even coached a student to play the concerto in public in Munich in 1883. The first public performance with orchestra was given neither by Franz Strauss nor Oscar Franz, but by Gustav Leinhaus and the Meiningen Orchestra conducted by Hans von Bülow on March 4, 1885. Strauss liked Leinhaus's tone quality, which was much like his father's own, and he wrote to his father that Leinhaus possessed what he considered a rare quality in horn players: colossal sureness. Although Strauss was only 19 when the concerto was completed, the work shows great originality. In 3 short and continuous movements, the work abandons traditional sonata form and its themes migrate from one movement to the next in a fashion developed and exploited by Liszt and others. The opening flourish of the horn solo becomes transformed into the main theme of the rondo finale. The lyrical theme from the first movement appears in the middle of the slow movement, and the opening of the slow movement is briefly alluded to near the end of the last movement. Further, the brief rising hunting horn figure introduced in the orchestra's first section reappears throughout, most saliently in the passage that joins the slow movement and the finale. With its appealing, memorable themes and concise writing, the first concerto fully warrants its popularity, just as it continues to challenge the best of present-day horn virtuosos. The piece is scored for 2 flutes, 2 oboes, 2 clarinets, 2 bassoons, 2 horns, 2 trumpets, timpani, and strings. Our final piece is Symphony No. 7 in A major, Opus 92 by Ludwig van Beethoven. He was born in Bonn. We assume on December 16, 1770, since he was baptized on December 17th, and he died in Vienna on March 26, 1827. Beethoven began composing his celebrated A major symphony in 1811, completing it in May of the following year. He conducted the premiere in Vienna on December 8, 1813, at a crowd-pleasing concert that also featured his Wellington's Victory and 2 marches played by an automatic trumpeter and panharmonicon, a colossal mechanical instrument that imitated orchestral sounds. These machines had been invented by Johann Melzel, famous for his refinement and patenting of the metronome. Though the concert was a success both musically and financially, the Seventh Symphony could hardly compete with the program's more spectacular companion pieces. Nevertheless, the symphony was well received, and the allegretto had to be encored on the spot. Such repetition of individual movements, even before the performance of the work was completed, was a common practice in the days before recordings. The entire performance was repeated on December 12th, much to Beethoven's pleasure. Composer and violinist Louis Spohr was present and later wrote of Beethoven's uncertain and sometimes ludicrous conducting. The composer would crouch well beneath the music stand in soft passages and leap into the air for loud ones. Because of Beethoven's advanced state of deafness, these moves were occasionally ill-timed, demonstrating again that the tempos he heard in his head were hard to realize. His metronome markings have caused great debate in this regard. The symphony's outward simplicity and joie de vivre mask a wealth of details that proclaim Beethoven's sophisticated and ingenious art of construction. At the time of composition, the slow introduction was one of the longest in the repertoire. It serves to present the harmonic vocabulary for the entire symphony. Beethoven takes third-related excursions to keys outside the home key's normal sphere of influence. The ensuing vivace also contains brief passages in keys quite removed from the main tonality. Another unusual feature is the symphony's foregoing of a true slow movement, presenting instead an allegretto for the second movement. Beethoven outdid himself in the third movement, presto, which is an elaboration of the scherzo trio idea, containing not one but two middle sections in the form A-B-A-B-A, coda. His brief coda alludes to the B section yet a third time, as if to say jokingly, here we go again, but then the movement is suddenly over. But perhaps the most salient elements of the Seventh Symphony are rhythmic, leading Wagner to describe the work as the apotheosis of the dance. Beethoven was fascinated with rhythmic devices, sometimes to the exclusion of all other factors, including melody. A prime example occurs in the first movement in the bridge between the introduction and the vivace, where for 9 full measures, the only note sounded is a reiterated E, echoed by winds and strings in prolonged suspense. The vivace itself contains several themes, almost all permeated by the contagious germinal dotted rhythm. The second movement, allegretto, opens with a passage also predominantly rhythmic. The subsequent counter melodies and contrasting sections render the movement beautiful. Yet the incessant rhythmic cell of the opening is almost always present side by side with the lyric subjects. The rhythmic momentum accumulated in the presto and allegro con brio, the last movement, is no less masterful for being self-evident. Again, Wagner's reference to the dance comes to mind. The symphony, in fact, has been choreographed on several occasions by Massin, Isadora Duncan, and the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo. To each his or her own, however. The composer Vincent d'Indy heard and imagined the Seventh Symphony as nothing else than a pastoral symphony. The rhythm of the piece has nothing of the dance about it. It would seem rather to come from the song of a bird. With all the superlatives that are now heaped upon the Seventh Symphony, it is incredible and smile-provoking to look back on a time when it was not so universally admired. The following appeared in the London Harmonicon in 1825, quoted in Slimsky's Lexicon of Musical Invective. Beethoven's Seventh Symphony is a composition in which the author has indulged in a great deal of disagreeable eccentricity. Often, as we now have heard it performed, we cannot yet discover any design in it, neither can we trace any connection in its parts. Altogether, it seems to have been intended as some kind of enigma. We had almost said a hoax. It's scored for 2 flutes, 2 oboes, 2 clarinets, 2 bassoons, 2 horns, 2 trumpets, timpani, and strings.